Hi there guys, what's going on, and welcome back. My name is Jellybuddy Joe, and today we are doing another Rome 2 online battle. As today I'm playing as Carthage against the Roman Empire, but let's go into how I recorded this video is a little bit different to the others, so we'll go into that first. So as you can see, I'm actually recording this live as I'm playing it, and then I decided to do the editing and commentary afterwards. So I've gone through the entire video for you, and I've sped up the bits which were a bit boring, etc, etc. It was about a 40-minute battle, and I managed to get it down to around 18 to 20 minutes, I believe. So it's not too bad. So this is all sped up this bit. But as you can see, I'm just assessing his army here. And talking about armies, let's go over what I decided to choose for this battle. So to start with, playing as Carthage, we're playing defensively during this video, which is a bit of a strange thing for me. I usually like to play offensively, as anyone who goes against me will know, for the simple fact that I like the little bonuses you get off it, etc, etc. They're really quite helpful. But this time I thought, oh, if it's Carthage versus Rome, I'll let him be Rome, even though usually my tactics that I like to employ really do excel when I'm the Romans. But I decided that I'll be Carthage and spice things up a bit, because it's a bit boring if I just do the same thing over and over again. So as you can see, my unit setup, we had two groups of shot cavalry and two groups of citizen melee cavalry. Now the reason I chose to do a split of those two was the simple fact that I thought, given my setup from the start, I kind of had a plan, or an overall plan of what I was going to do, and I decided that shot cavalry would be good to punch holes, or shock his tougher infantry before I employed my pikemen or infantry against them. Things like that really do help out against the Romans. The next thing I had is three groups of mercenary Cretan archers. Now these units actually became probably one of the most important units of the game all the way from the beginning. They actually were very, very useful, but I'll leave you to see that in the future. Then we've got three groups of African pikemen there to form the front barricade of my formation. Now the only thing I have to say about this is that I'm not very good at using pikemen. Generally I don't like them, for the simple fact that they're quite slow, sluggish, and although they're effective if they're head-on, there's not a lot of maneuverability in facing other units on the battlefield. So it was kind of a 50-50 choice for me to take them in the first place, but I decided to, since I was playing defensively, they're quite a good, solid defensive unit if you use them correctly. But you'll see later on in the video it's actually quite hard for me to use them effectively during this battle. But moving on, we've got three groups of thorax swordsmen. These are the sword-based melee infantry I wanted to back up my pikemen, etc. It's always good to have a mix between sword and spear, especially when you're up against the Romans, because the Romans generally are sword and shield, and they do excel versus spear infantry. So I thought that hoplite type infantry would not be such the best idea in this situation. So next we had four groups of sacred bands, which are pretty much hoplites, but the Carthaginian version. And I pitched them against the Triarii, which my opponent had, etc. So my opponent's army, speaking of which, let's go over it. So we had one group of one group of ranged cavalry up against me. As you can see here, my archers are engaging. I had the ranged advantage. I managed to pick quite a few of them off, and they retreated out of the battle pretty quickly actually, so that was quite good. That's kind of the skirmish side of things of what happened in the battle with my Cretan archers, and that's where my Cretan archers already at the beginning of the battle start to speed ahead a little bit. So he has three groups of armoured Syrian archers, which is the same range, slightly less power than my archers, but there's quite a decisive factor in this game. He had four groups of Triarii as far as I'm aware, four groups of Praetorian Guard, and four groups of Evocati cohorts, and two groups of Praetorian Cavalry and a Legatus. So we're quite a mixed army on his approach, which I thought was quite good for him, quite a good army setup, not what I would have chosen personally, but then again I have a completely different tactic to facing armies, I suppose, than what he does. As you can see here, he moves forward. My mercenary Cretan archers are just really wrecking up his Syrian archers at the moment, and he pretty much realises straight away that this is really going to be a viable option for him. And as you can see, my Cretan archers will pretty much rout one of his Syrian archer groups pretty much straight away, and he quickly makes the decision, seeing how the confrontation is going, or the skirmish is going, to retreat all of his units quickly back to a safe distance away from my Cretan archers. Not a bad move by him, because if he would have stayed there, he would have lost all his units. But while we're here, I want to talk about what I'm doing right now. You'll notice that I have a lot of cavalry just dotted around the back, not really in any formation or line. I was trying to get those in specific position actually behind the hills, because I did honestly think, and he's doing it right now as I speak actually, he's going to split up his soldiers into two flanks. Now he's done this on a video, I think 2 videos ago, King of the Hill I believe, and he did it then. He split his army into two different sides, quite evenly matched, and I decided that, well, I thought he'd do it again. So as you can see here, I'm trying to move my cavalry around. Now, I'm thinking, why are you moving your cavalry around? He's going to own the cavalry. Well, I'm hoping, or taking a gamble, that he doesn't really notice them or see them very well as they go behind this sand dune here. Because what I'm hoping is, as he comes around the flank and he engages my infantry, I can use that cavalry to charge into the back of his lines, which will crush his lines from the inside out. That was the plan anyway, and it's quite an effective plan. I thought it was quite clever, if it worked, and it's one of those that's if it's worked. Now at this point here, we're getting into a more skirmisher confrontation. We've got him kind of bringing around some Praetorian Guard and bringing forward some Praetorian cavalry there on the side. Now at this point I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to run down my Cretan archers with his cavalry, so I bring up my two groups of hidden cavalry there from the wing and pretty much cut off his route to my archers, because I know that's what he's going to try and do. So that's a pretty good tactical move as well at this point. As you can see, he's still trying to get to them though. He's really not giving up, but he can pretty much see straight away that if he does that, he's going to lose his Praetorian cavalry. Now, would that have been a worthy sacrifice for him to do to get rid of the archers? In my opinion, probably yes. I probably would have carried on charging and just took out as many archers as I possibly could, because they were, you know, super effective in this battle. At this point here, my cavalry are way off to the left side, so I haven't really got a chance. So I retreat the Cretan archers, and he realises just before he's about to make impact that the only thing he's going to be able to do off of that is run into pikes, and that's not good for cavalry. But he's still moving his infantry around the sides here and making it very awkward for me to move. I'm trying to think of what to do tactically to gain the advantage here, because it's hard for me to push him back tactically down the hill. If he manages to come around the sides with his infantry and strike me from the sides, then I don't have the uphill advantage anymore. But saying that again, the tactics which I tried to employ are quite a sturdy formation, I thought, so I didn't want to break that formation to go and meet him in the open, especially when it came to Praetorian Guards, because he's probably owned my men quite significantly in the battle, or magnificently in the battle. So using the Cretan archers here, I try and form up a line of defence, but you know, at this point I'm worried. I'm pretty concerned about what's going on, but I know that my formation and my men are pretty strong and set as a whole. So as you can see here, I walk out to meet him on the side of the hill on the right flank, because I want to get him engaged in my infantry at the right time, or right kind of placement, so this cavalry at the back here can smash straight into his infantry. Now I see some Triarii coming up, but I hope my cavalry can get there and smash into the back of the infantry and wrap it all up by the time the Triarii get there. But he started moving units forward around the sides. Now this was a good tactic by him, because that's one thing you never want to really take pikemen from the front when in a battle, so he tries to flank me around with quite strong units while keeping some strong units in the centre. So at this point here, I'm thinking, shit, I'm going to have to go and deal with the Praetorians, which isn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of do it one by one. But as you can see here, the right flank starts to get a bit messy, and I employ some more cavalry to go in. So at this point, I'm feeling quite confident that we can hold the flanks, and if we can hold the flanks and win significantly and still have a few units, then it will be good for the rest of the battle. But to be honest, it's one of those things where I wasn't really sure which way it was going to go, and it all depends on the use of my cavalry, which is something I knew it would all come down to, which gave me an advantage in the battlefield. So this is pretty much where the combat begins as a whole. As you can see, I moved my cavalry just round the side there, trying to get round the back. Now, I knew at this point he has stronger units generally in melee, so I had to pull my African pikemen away from the centre, which wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to keep my formation as strong as possible, but I realised that as things stood, his men were pretty much winning, and I knew, especially on the left flank where his Praetorian Guards were, that my men would not hold out, so I had to employ some African pikemen there to try and help out. As you can see from the front, he was trying to get at me with two more groups of Praetorians. Now, that was a pain in the ass generally, but I managed to try and smash into the back of them with my cavalry. As you can see, that's the only way I thought I was going to be able to hold the flanks, is if I was to be able to get an advantage over his infantry using cavalry to really smash the back of his Praetorians. And I managed to do that pretty well for the starting bit of this, but as you can see down below on the bottom bar there, one of my Thorax swordsman groups is already about to waver, and that's really not a good thing, especially in that cluster to the right flank there was where a lot of it all came down to, really, and it all came down to the units. Now, I do deploy some buffs on every available unit here to try and hold out, but as you can see, he brings in his cavalry units there to help out as well, so he employs the same type of tactics as me. But on the left flank here, I think I'm actually making quite good progress, which is actually really good. As you can see, I charge my cavalry straight into the back of his second Praetorian group there, but then I decided to pull them down and try and do a stupid move. This is probably the worst move that I could have done. Generally, is I try and take them through to take out his archers, because his archers are pummeling my African pikemen on the hill there. Now, that was probably a bad option, because I should have really took out his Praetorian guards, but as you can see, they pretty much fall anyway. So now it's just a bunch of Triarii versus my Sacred Band over there on the left flank, and it all comes down to the right flank really. Now, this isn't what I was expecting at the beginning of the battle, for the simple fact I told you that he had a stronger left flank with his Praetorian guards than he did a right flank, but for some reason my right flank had fallen quite niftily, so I employed some African pikemen to charge in there, but he sees it come in and pretty much runs away, and that's the problem with African pikemen. So at this point I think, right, okay, he's pretty much pulling back all of his units to a safe point, and my units are everywhere. As you can see, they're auto-charging and everything, and it's just not going very well at all. And this is a bit where I lose a lot of unnecessary men by accident, and that's just down to a sheer volume of micromanagement I need to do, and just generally not being organised because of my men running away, etc, etc. So at this point I think, right, okay, it's time to get everyone formed back up in a formation. Now, just looking at the unit numbers, like the number of flags in general, I can see that he has a lot more units than I do left on the battlefield, and a lot better units as well. Mine are injured, tired, you know, I've lost probably about half of my units altogether, if not a bit more, and he's still going quite strong with his units over there. Now, at this point, he was actually telling me that he thought he was going to lose, etc, etc, but I think he overestimated the power of the pikemen, which I had on the hill. For the simple fact that I knew with the type of units he had cavalry, he had a whole mix left, whereas I was down, I only had one group of cavalry left, and they were pretty much, there wasn't many of them left at all, and I had no ranged units either. So when it came to a situation like this and I was defending, I pretty much knew that the best thing I could do is just hold out and try and take as many men as I could. Now, I had quite a lot of units left, don't get me wrong, but at this point, given my position and just varied types of units compared to his, I knew it was going to be difficult to pull off a win in general. Now, I also knew that he'll do one thing he always does, which is try and flank round, but as you can see, I was losing visibility every single time. The hill was actually working against me now in the battle, which isn't really what I wanted to any degree. So his archers kept firing shots every single time I tried to get a look at his men on the other side of the hill, and it just made it really difficult for me to actually do anything and prepare, because I didn't know what he was doing on the other side of the hill. But, you know, knowing my opponent as I did, I knew he was going to try and flank round. So I saw the cavalry come up, he wanted to have a look at me. At this point he was like, oh, you've got loads of units, etc, etc. I think really he didn't understand the advantages he had over me, but you'll see with the outcome of the video what actually happened using the troops he did. So as you can see, we're going into the last stage of the battle now. We've kind of had an engagement, kind of gone back out, so reset up, and we're going back in again. And at this point here I do what I kind of class as a stupid move, but I kind of use them a tiny bit wisely. But as you can see, he sees my cavalry charge from behind and tries to run away. Now at this point I take a cheap shot at his archers. I think if I can get rid of them, then they won't be able to pummel my infantry anymore, because that's one thing I was very worried about. So I quickly just charged into the back of them as fast as I possibly could, knowing I'd lose my cavalry with swiftly because of the amount of Triarii there was down there. And as I predicted also, he was making a move on the left and right again, and that's always been his tactic when he's against me to do with pikemen, and that's one good tactic to do, because then you have to reshuffle your entire lines and it makes it awkward. And as you can see at this point, he was like, oh, you're making a noob square, da 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 da, and it's like, at this moment in time, the only thing I could do, given the selection of units they had, was to create a kind of noob square. Now I purposely didn't try and hug the back of the map as such, but I did try and fortify my position. Now at this point I was thinking, okay, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I can't really push out with the units I've got, because they haven't got the speed, you know, the maneuverability of his units, etc. And he has cav and archers on the other side of the hill. So what was I gonna do? Well, quite simply, I tried to push forward with my pikes on both sides at the same time, hoping that his micromanagement skills would fall down, somewhat, and mean that he would forget about my advancing pikemen on the left, which he kind of did, as far as I'm aware. So I advance here, but as you can see, with more than one unit, he tries to smash the side of me with cavalry, but I've got some sacred bands in backup, and they do manage to. But as you can see here, my general pikemen are just everywhere. They're not really formed up and ready for an engagement, and I can't keep them in one solid position because they keep getting killed. They keep getting flanked. Sorry. In every possible corner, which is really making the battle awkward for me to use my pikemen effectively. But that's the trait of a good opposition, I suppose, is making the strengths of my units not so strengthy, if you get my meaning. But we quickly wrap up the Triario, try to send around the flank there, and I tried to get a flank on them. And at this point, I have the Sacred Band out there because they charged out there after the infantry like idiots, and that's that's my own fault for not micromanaging properly. But as you can see here, he's fighting, and I think at this point we've got it wrapped up, but then I realised that behind us there may just be a group of Praetorians coming from behind us, and now that's really not a good thing, because with that tiny group of phalanx, I don't think they're going to be able to hold off a whole group of Praetorians, no matter how good they are. Now at this point I realise I've left my Sacred Bands pretty much behind, a fair distance away. I was trying to lure him into attacking my pikemen from behind with the other group he's got on the left flank over there, but he did so, but obviously, look, as he moved in other units, I knew that my plan had pretty much been followed in its tracks, and I was not going to be able to get the counter flank on him. Because usually what happens is, if you lure someone in to flank your own pikemen, you know your pikemen are going to get hurt or die, but then you can flank round with a stronger unit and then crush them from the back. So it comes like a triple-decker sandwich in the middle of a battlefield. And that's kind of what I tried to do at this point, but it would not work. So pretty much the last of my men which were still alive here, I was trying to organise the best I could to use my pikemen effectively, but in this situation, pikemen kind of need to be backed up by a strong infantry force or ranged force in order to be successful. As you can see, my men became isolated in groups on either side. We killed a lot, don't get me wrong, we put up a good fight, but my variation of units just was not adequate, and it kind of ended up with me trying to use the units in a way they're not supposed to be used, and the pikemen were slow, ineffective, and although I had a good, pretty much fresh group of pikemen there, they just would not engage properly, and as I got flanked there by Syrian archers, I got flanked by archers, and these guys just got sandwiched, and that is a proper sandwich. I knew it was pretty much all over, and in this type of battle, I think it's more of a learning curve than I thought it was a good game, for the simple fact that it's a learning curve, because now you have to be aware of your unit strengths and weaknesses, I suppose, in the battle, and that's kind of what my opponent was, and he managed to exploit those pretty well. I don't know if he meant to or not, but he did. So this is kind of the outcome of the battle at this point. As you can see, one last ditch effort to mobilise my men, but quickly, well, pretty much instantly, as soon as those get sandwiched from behind and my men start routing there, the other Sacred Band, actually no, African pikemen even, it was not long, and the last group of African pikemen pretty much run away straight away. Even though they're not injured, they decide to run away. As you can see, it was a costly enemy victory, so it wasn't all doom and gloom, and that pretty much sums up the entirety of the battle. I lost about 1,100 men, he lost about 1,000 men, and yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be back at a later date with more Rome 2 online battles. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. See you guys in a bit.